Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of Walking Down the Warwick Road, the December show. Try to come at you every month, and I'm excited about this one, Pete. You and I have been talking about this one for a few weeks now, and I'm really excited to dive into what we're going to talk about today. How have you been, mate?
Yeah, pretty good. Surviving, which is the main name of the game. I'm doing okay and kind of ready for Christmas. Christmas 2020, anyway. The kind of it's going to be different, very different, but doing all right. A bit tentative about where United are at the moment, but when there are bigger things in the world, it does make you realise that footy has its place, as important as it is,
Absolutely.
What about yourself?
Been well. Things are, unfortunately, COVID cases are rising here in Canada, so we might see ourselves back into lockdown soon, but just sort of navigating through, still obviously focusing on United, and that's sort of what tends to get you through is the football, I think, and even though their fans aren't there, but I was watching. If this is your first time tuning in, I'm Tim Stockton, obviously based in Canada. You can hear from the funny accent. Pete Molyneux, my co-host, based in the UK, and very much a different sort of show or different podcast maybe from what you might be used to with United. Lots of shows out there that cover sort of present day United and really detailed analysis of the current team and match reviews and previews. This isn't that. This isn't a podcast like that. Something that you certainly won't see elsewhere. We believe we talk a lot about United's history and really dive into yesteryear United. And today will be no different. Really good guest today and a really good topic. But Pete, before we get to sort of where we want to, the season that we're going to focus on today in United yesteryear, we always sort of start the show with a bit of present day United and just talk in a general sense about the situation. So a lot has sort of changed since we last spoke. Obviously, United out of the Champions League now, but the league form has improved. What's your sort of general sense of United at the moment?
Well, I've kind of come to accept over the last few months, Tim, probably like a lot of Reds, a lot of football fans generally, it's going to be a bizarre season. And it's turning out to be a bizarre season. Bizarre mainly because, obviously, the crowds aren't there. And for someone who has been an integral part of United's crowd for best part of 60 years, I find it bizarre, and even when I say it now, that they're playing football without crowds. I mean, they are. I've had to accept that. But it's taken away completely any advantage the home team has, or disadvantage the away team has. And so we're getting some crazy results. Lots more away wins, lots more mid-table teams going to the big grounds and getting very good results. So it's a little bit bizarre. What's crazy about United is, of course, the away form is unbelievable. We're even giving teams a goal start. And we can't do anything at Old Trafford. But if you think that what we're missing is, people spend a lot of time talking about we're missing a fullback, we're missing a midfielder, we're missing a striker. We're missing 73,000 people screaming for 90 minutes. That's what we're missing at Old Trafford in the home games. And I know other teams, obviously, Liverpool have big fanatical gates, and so do some other clubs. But Liverpool are more a finished product and a machine now that can turn it out with or without crowds. We're still developing. And the support that United fans would have given this developing team of salt jars has been priceless before the lockdown and would have been priceless now. So I think we've got to make allowances. Very disappointing to be out of the Champions League because that is the Las Vegas for Manchester United. The league is only the London Palladium.
Yeah.
Being at the pinnacle of European football, of club football, is what we should always aim for. So very disappointing, especially when we had a good start. In the league, well, there you go. Talk about bizarre. Win the game in hand and with 2 points behind. Yeah. And yet there's a lot of people spending their time pressing buttons saying that Solskjaer should be sacked. Don't get it. Never happened in United's history before. I don't think if the ground was open, there'd be many people in the ground calling for his head. So for now, we carry on, in my opinion. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on the league form. It's really anybody's league this year in terms of other teams that are dropping points as well. United win their game in hand, like you touched on 2 games back. And in terms, I know there was massive disappointment for people in going out of the Champions League, but at the end of the day, if we're taking the long view with Solskjaer, surely it's part of the development of any young team that there's going to be disappointment and road bumps along the way, and learning to navigate your way through all the competitions that you want to be sort of contending in, as well as doing it at Manchester United, where you're always going to get attention. Surely it's a bit of a learning curve for some of these younger players in order, learning how to accept that pressure and navigate their way through the season. So, overall, look, it's the festive period. It's Christmas time. United are 5 points off the top of the table. For me, it's something to be excited about this Christmas, with Leeds coming up on the weekend. So that's my view.
Yeah, no, I think we kind of concur then. I think, if I'm not mistaken, somebody tell me if I am, it's December the 18th. I think it's just 2 years since Ollie got the job. I know we played at Anfield on the 16th and lost, and then Mourinho was sacked on the 18th, the Monday, so maybe he got it on the following day. But anyway, the point is, the guy's just been in the job 2 years. Yeah. I think you've always got to give a manager the resources he needs, and that's time and money. He's had a bit of money so far, and he's had 2 years can never be enough, I don't think, not to build something lasting. I got a lot of hassle for calling time on Fergie after 3 years. So let's give this guy another 12 months, get the fans back in early 2021 and see where we go. But we can't stay on that merry-go-round of appoint a manager, buy some more players, sack a manager, buy some more players, and so on. It very rarely works. So in my eyes, Ollie's still the man, and I'll take any abuse anybody wants to give me for that.
Well, I think you and I certainly share the same view on that one, Pete. Well, shall we move on to what is really the meat and potatoes of our podcast? And we have a very special guest today. But I want to remind you guys, get in the comments. As the show is progressing, we want to pull your comments up. We want to answer your questions. If you have any questions for Pete or a guest who we'll introduce in a second, get involved. This show is very much for you, the viewers, and it's one of those things where, Pete, I think when we develop this podcast and we're starting it, where it doesn't matter if you know a lot about United's history or not, or maybe you were there and lived it and you want to get involved. It's very much a podcast that we want to encompass all or the complete range of United supporter. Get involved and let us know what it is that you want to talk about or what your questions are.
Yep.
Folks, today, so we're going to be talking today about the 1958-59 season, and obviously the first season after Munich. And we have a special guest with us, Roy Kavanagh, author of many a United book, longtime read, and somebody who lived through the season that we're going to talk about today, and is able to really bring that season to life for us, which is something that we always strive for on the show, Pete. I mean, obviously, being myself and over here in Canada, I can read about it, but it's a real pleasure to have you here, Roy, to help us bring this season to life for people.
It's my delight to be in your company, Tim, and also Pete, who I'm not sure still owes me for about 4 Peronis when we go out for a drink, but we'll come to that in the new year.
Make sure you collect too. Make sure you collect from them.
Where are you, Tim? Are you in Toronto or are you in Niagara?
I'm in Niagara Falls. Yeah, I'm about an hour and 20 minutes away from around the lake from Toronto.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. Toronto is one of my favorite cities. Love it.
I'm about 30 minutes from. This is my for United supporters. I'm about 30 minutes away from the birthplace of Jimmy Nicol.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So I can remember being in Toronto when that dreaded day. Pete will have been there when we played at West Ham, and Blackburn were playing at Liverpool,
Right.
when the title was settled, and the time differences, of course. And we were walking downtown Toronto, and it had a pub where the two games are going to be shown. And I stupidly picked a paper up, and in the stop press it said that Blackburn had won the league title. I thought, oh, I won't be going in there today. We'll go somewhere.
Great
I
story.
bet Pete was at Upton Park, weren't you, Pete?
I was where their goalie had the game of his life, and it just wasn't meant to be. It just wasn't meant to be. If Cantona hadn't got banned that season, we would have won another double. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another double. So, but we can't be too greedy. But good to see you, Roy. I mean, I know we don't live too far away, and we have met up in the past, but because we live in that wonderful moneyed area called Tier 3, we can't go out, can we?
No, only we can go to Tesco though, so I'm surprised we've not bumped into each other there.
We'll have to coordinate that. But great to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on. And
pleasure, my pleasure.
We're going to we might as well get into it then, shall we, Tim?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So, Roy, kind of just to set it up before we actually get into the 58-59 season itself. Obviously, the dreadful events of Munich had happened in February that year, and United had limped along in the league with a reserve team to really fulfill their fixtures for 57-58. Got to the cup final, ran out of steam, lost to Bolton, and then came up for air. And the World Cup happened in 58. But as 58-59 season was about to start, Roy, what was the mood in the camp, say, amongst United supporters generally? And as a young lad, what was your feeling about the start of 58-59?
I wouldn't use the word trepidation because I don't think I can spell it now, never mind as an 11-year-old back then. But I think there was that feeling of what is going to happen, because obviously we had limped along because of the dire circumstances we were in, and got to a cup final. Then we'd had the World Cup during that summer as well, when England bizarrely never picked Bobby Charlton, even though they'd taken him. But yet Harry Gregg was the goalkeeper of the tournament. So I think it was really to see which way the ball was going to bounce, and it started bouncing really well. I mean, Charlton got a hat trick on the first game, and then he got another 2 goals in a 3-0 win at Forest. And suddenly, and you can't say we were back to normal, because that took another 5-6 years really till Dennis came. But there was a feeling there. Oh, hang on, football's back, and let's get down there and see what's actually happening.
Okay. And you mentioned obviously, of course, we don't want to dwell too much on the events of Munich. That's another season, although of course nobody would ever forget what happened. But when you think of it, Roy, the season starts in August as ever. Matt Busby's back on for the first time. Jimmy Murphy had taken over for the end of the previous season. He's still on crutches. He's only 6 months when the season starts since he did nearly lose his life. He had the last rites at least 2 or 3 times, depending which reports you read. I believe he still had constant back pain. Some of the reporters that interviewed him then for the Evening News and the Chronicle said they'd go and see him, and sometimes he'd be sweating profusely, having tried to do a few steps without crutches. So he's still recovering. And of course, United are still trying to put a backroom staff together in people that they'd lost in the crash. So apart from what had happened the previous season, it was still all very raw, I guess.
Very, very much so. I say Charlton obviously had definitely come back fully fit. Dennis Violet was back as well. Albert Scanlon, which was important, he also came back. So the forward line was starting to take a bit of shape, really. The big news, of course, for all United fans, even little lads like me, was this magnanimous gesture by the European authorities, not the British authorities, by the European authorities, who'd actually invited United to play in the European Cup. Now, bear in mind, people today may just have forgot or never knew that the European Cup was only for the champions. So there was only 16 teams in it. And United were given an invite. Wolverhampton Wanderers were the champions of the previous season, so they were in it. And United readily accepted, but our lovely league decided that, oh no, you can't go, you're not the champions. And they refused United entry. But the Football Association, who actually, via Sir Stanley Rouse, was very cooperative to United. Rouse was a big friend, very big friend of Matt Busby's. Sorry for going back in history, but he'd invited Busby to manage the 1948 Olympic team, which he was in overall charge of, and they'd become really good friends. And the FA said, no, they should be able to enter. And then the league protested, and United appealed and won the appeal. Now, in the rule books at that point, when an appeal has been upheld, that was it. But somehow there was a contravene between the Football Association, Football League, and United on the day of the Blackpool game, the end of August, were denied permission to play. They were already in the draw. They'd already drawn a team called Young Boys of, well, you will know those, Young Boys of Bern, the Swiss champions, and United asked permission to play them as 2 friendly games, which they duly did in October. But I mean, that was just another diabolical, callous, unthinking approach. And anyone who truly reads the history of when we went into the European Cup in 1956 and the battles that we had, and the something over Busby's shoulder all the time, knowing that the Football League were totally against it, and yet the
they were mainly concerned that the European competition, we wouldn't be able to fulfil our fixtures on a Saturday if we got held up. Was the main concern. But they also thought that European competitions would take the spotlight off the Football League, and how short-sighted that was when you look back. You mentioned actually Stanley Rouse giving Busby the job of the Olympic team in '48, Roy. Of course, when Busby came back in '58 from his what do they call it when you're getting better, when you're recovering, he came back in August '58 as the manager of Manchester United, but also manager of Scotland.
Yes. Well, there's an intriguing game in October. I don't know if you want to leave it for a little while, but the Everton away game in October is a very interesting story.
All right. Hold it there.
Okay,
we will most definitely get there.
Right.
Yeah.
We certainly want to hear the story, but we might as well start the season then. That started in the August, just to help anybody that is tuning in follow this. Tim's putting up the fixtures and the slides, so we're going to do it in sort of bite-sized chunks. But the first 8 games, they're up there, Roy. You should be able to see them, and probably remember them well. Do you want to? We get off generally. We get off to a decent start. 8 games, 4 wins, 2 draws, and 2 defeats, and about 5th in the table. Anything you want to pick out from there, Roy?
Yeah, well, the four home matches. I mean, just look at the goal scoring: 5-2 against Chelsea, 6-1 against a newly promoted Blackburn Rovers, managed by Johnny Carey, by the way, on that day. 4-1 against West Ham. When I went to that game, I remember that game. Albert Scanlon had an absolute blinder. He played brilliant. Scored 3 goals, as you can see there.
Just on that West Ham game, Roy, real quick, do you remember anything else about that West Ham game that might stand out for people?
I know Bobby Moore played for West Ham.
Yeah, he made his debut that day. That's right, 17-year-old Bobby Moore.
And Colleen Webster, a much underrated reserve, although he was a bit of a rumbugger, was Colin. But Colin stepped in and got another goal. So that start to that season, a lot of goals which carried on throughout the season as it happened. Charlton in great goal scoring form, Scanlon back and fully fit. Dennis Spilett not scoring as many goals early on as he finished up with getting. But Dennis Spilett was a truly, truly great footballer, by the way.
Roy, You touched on the goals. That was one of the notes I marked down from that 8-game stretch was 23 goals scored and 11 conceded. They really brought their goal scoring boots to start the season. When you look that in contrast to the way the season finished the previous season, the 57-58 season, where United only took 7 points from 28 to end the season, how much of a surprise was this for you as a supporter back then that, it really was a terrific start to the season in context of what had happened the season before?
I don't think it was a surprise. It wasn't as big a surprise because you just knew that if Dennis Violet was in the team and fit, and Charlton was in the team and fit, and Scanlon was in the team and fit, which they weren't really. Charlton was nearly fit at the end of the 57-8 season, but Dennis only came back for the last 3 or 4 games, and Albert didn't play at all. He was late coming back from Munich. So, you knew the goal scoring was there. Harry Gregg in goal, of course, as well. Billy Foulkes at fullback. So we had a decent team, but we really needed a strong centre half. Wilf McGuinness came back as well this season, and that was vital because Wilf had been Duncan Edwards' understudy all the way through, really. It was a year behind him when he first signed for United. But Wilf incredibly finished up playing for England during this season. His form was so good. So the players were there and you knew what they could do because remember that when the crash happened and just after, United had 22 very good footballers. They had 11 creme de la creme and they had another 11 who was whatever's next to creme de la creme. And in those days, if your number 7 was injured, the reserve number 7 played. You didn't make 4 changes, or you didn't put, a Juan Mata on the right wing who is a number 10. Or you didn't put Greenwood on the right wing who is our best number 9. You played your number 7 and you had a reserve number 7. So, things such as that were a difference.
The other one,
sorry, Tim. I just thought with Roy mentioned a few of the players there. We realised some people that might be watching, they've not seen pictures of these players before. I'm sure many will, but have you got the slide that shows just some of the players that were in the squad? We're going to come to the guy in the top left-hand corner in a second, Roy. But these were the players we picked out that at the end of the season had played the most games. I know they didn't all start the season, but just for folks to take a few minutes to see some of the lads who were the heroes, the massive heroes of Manchester United in 1958. With a weight on the shoulders, one of playing for Manchester United, and then as now one of the biggest clubs in the country, most famous clubs in the world, but also with the weight of not so much expectation, but to try and do the best for the guys who had lost their lives,
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I mean, looking at those photographs and those names for people, when I said United had an understudy for every single first team player in that number. So Harry Gregg there was the goalkeeper, but Harry had only joined United just before Munich, and my all-time Busby Babes hero was the unsung goalkeeper Ray Wood, and Ray Wood had come back from Munich, so we had 2 great goalkeepers. We had Billy Foulkes at right back. Ian Greaves could play right back or left back and was a very, very good footballer. Ronnie Coke was a very decent centre half, but he didn't quite have that strength of mind that Foulkes had when he played there. Sadly, we lost both fullbacks at Munich, of course, not only the great Roger Byrne, but also Jeff Bent. So Joe Carolan there became a Republic of Ireland international. So, he was a more than adequate number 3. Wilf McGuinness, no one could replace Duncan Edwards, but Wilf McGuinness finished up playing for England that season at number 6. Freddie Goodwin was a very good clubman, had a great career later on in his life and was one of the big factors in the American Football League, Tim. Starting over there, great career and life in America, as of course did Dennis Violet. Warren Bradley will probably come to a bit later on. Pete, in November when he made his debut. Quicksall will come to in a bit. But you've got Dennis Vardy, you've got Bobby Charlton, you've got Albert Scanlon. You know, you had a lot of very, very good players, and they now were recovering physically, if not mentally, from what had happened in February '58.
Roy, when you look at that season too, one of the players that I was actually asking Pete about earlier, if you look back to the previous season, was kind of thrown into it because of what happened at Munich, was Alec Dawson. And we saw in the first game, he scored 2 goals. The season before, he had scored the first game back after Munich, and I believe he scored in a FA Cup replay against Fulham. I thought he scored a hat-trick in the 57-58 season. I might be mistaken. But he went on to have a 20-goal season in 60-61. Was he a player that, you know, at the start of that season that the United faithful were looking to as somebody that could continue that development and maybe, you know, blood into that front line and score some goals? Or
there was a trio of them actually, who played in the youth team and the reserves just before Munich. It was Johnny Giles, who I know there's a lot of hatred really regarding the Leeds link and everything, but Johnny Giles, a magnificent footballer. Alec Dawson, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the greatest goal scorers in youth history, reserve history. And you look at his first team at United, and the inside left, Mark Pearson, who was a very, very good footballer. And I think the Munich disaster had a massive effect on Dawson and particularly Mark Pearson. But Dawson was a magnificent goal scorer. And Busby, of course, had lost Tommy Taylor. And when you say magnificent goal scorer, you've lost probably the greatest centre forward in the world. Even though Di Stefano actually wore a number 9 shirt, he didn't play in what you and I would recognise as the conventional centre forward position. Dawson did, and he was a magnificent footballer. And he finished up going to Preston North End, where he had an equally great career, because Busby wanted that bit more experience and went for David Hurd the year after, I think. David Hurd came to United.
Right. Well, Pete, sorry, Pete, go ahead.
Oh, it's fine. No, it's good. No, because Alec Dawson, the Black Prince, I think, was his nickname. But you both of you lads touched on a point there that, in a nutshell, I remember reading something after Nobby Stiles passed away recently, where he was at the club, Nobby, although he's in the younger team. A team wiped out in the crash. Every team stepped up a school year overnight, didn't they? Reserves became first teamers, A teamers, reserves, B teamers, and I suppose some would have struggled to cope with it. Development doesn't happen like that normally. It happens over a period of time. But and maybe because of the lack of strength in debt, Roy, there we are with a decent start, and we go and buy a chap called Albert Quicksall in mid-September for a British record fee of £45,000 from Sheffield Wednesday. I guess we know what Busby was thinking, but what were you thinking, Roy, when we got him, when you heard the news?
Yeah, well, I went to his debut. His debut was against Tottenham, 2-2 draw, and that aforementioned Colleen Webster scored both the goals, actually. But Quicksall, there's a few stories behind that, and I'll be as brief as I can for you. Stop me if I'm going on too much. But in later life, I interviewed Albert for a book, and the British record then maximum would have been 35,000. I still think it might be 30. It might have been 35, and we finished up paying 45,000 for Albert Quicksall, who was a very good player, played for England. And funnily enough, had captained Sheffield Wednesday in the first game after the Munich crash at Old Trafford. A lovely ball playing inside right. And Sheffield Wednesday allegedly put 10,000 on his transfer fee. And the rumour was that they'd put 5,000 for Mark Jones and 5,000 for David Pegg, who they reckon United had stolen from under their noses when they were youngsters. And the fee was 45,000, which without a shadow of a doubt was at least 10,000 too much. And the old chairman, Harold Hardman, who I've just finished the book on his life, he definitely wasn't for paying the money. But Busby then had a new ally, and that was Louis Edwards, who was then on the board. And Louis Edwards actually coughed up the money or covered the money for Albert Quicksall. I went to his debut, 2-2 against Tottenham, and he looks $1 million. Shorter shorts than other players, blonde hair. Wow, you know, he looks what a £45,000 player should be. Unfortunately, the next few matches that didn't pan out form-wise.
Well, I was going to say, what could possibly go wrong? We've had a decent start. We spend a lot of money. Just on that, Roy, in Eamon Dunphy wrote a very good book around the early 90s about Matt Busby called A Strange Kind of Glory.
Yeah.
Got quite close to a lot of players who were still alive that had played around that time, and some of Matt's friends and family. But while obviously Busby's hallmark was bringing the youth players through, he had done from 1945, etc. But they believe with Louis Edwards, they decided, look, we couldn't take another 6 years to build the start of another team. We're going to have to spend big here, and perhaps they went out and paid a bit more money because they knew they had to get some star quality. There is also just something that you reminded me about Louis Edwards. People, I forget, I don't realise that United were woefully underinsured for the loss of those players in the plane crash. Nobody expected that. So they were covered for injury and things that the normal footballers in normal times are covered for. So the players that were lost and the injuries to players that couldn't play again left United not wanting in terms of, they were still fairly solvent, but they didn't have a lot of money in the pot. And I think Louis Edwards doesn't always get the credit, or Martin Edwards in turn, for what that family did to help the club in its darkest hour.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, actually. I mean, they were terribly underinsured. And of course, Harold Hardman was a Methodist, a man who had been at United when they'd gone through real financial problems in the 30s. And he was adamant that under his chairmanship, they weren't going to go under that again. I'm going to jump forward slightly. They had the next row was when they wanted to sign Dennis, which turned out, in my opinion, to be one of the two greatest United signings in my lifetime, the other one being Cantona, for the effect that they had on the team. But Dennis Law, 115,000. Harold Hardman would turn round to Matt and say, hang on, you've had a world record fee for Harry Gregg in goal, a record fee for Noel Cantwell at fullback, a big fee for Maurice Setters at left half, a record fee for Albert Quicksall at inside right, a big fee for David Hurd at centre forward. I'm sorry, I don't think you should be spending any more because the results are not picking up. And again, Edwards was a big factor in overseeing Mr. Hardman and in getting Dennis Law. But Albert came, great player, 2-2. We'd had a great start to the season, and you thought, hey, we're okay here.
We're okay.
But
so we'll have to deal with the dip before we get onto the good bit again. But if Tim can put the slide up, for over the next 3 months after we've got the record signing, over the next 10 games, it all turns to custard, Roy, as some people say.
Yeah. There's some interesting games there, to say the least. I will mention that Everton one, where they lost 3-2 in October. That's very interesting, that, because in my opinion, that's the only time Manchester United never had a manager escorting them at a football match. And the reason being, you mentioned it before, Pete, Matt Busby was still the Scotland team manager. And on that day, and again, incredibly, younger people won't believe this, but that was a Saturday, and there was an international between Scotland and Wales, and Matt Busby was the Scotland manager, and Jimmy Murphy was the Wales manager. And United were playing Everton that day, and of course the the current manager and the current assistant manager were actually in Cardiff, I think it was, for that international, which is quite incredible when you think about it. And a lovely story about the Preston North End, who, in my opinion, had the greatest English footballer I've seen that didn't wear a United shirt. And I know there's been some really good English, but was Tom Finney, later Sir Tom Finney. He was an absolute magnificent footballer. And I think I might have told you this story, Pete, before, but a lovely story that when Wilf McGuinness got his international debut, Tom Finney really looked after him. Everything he wanted to know, he took him under his wing. And Wilf said to him, as they were going away, he said, Tom, if there's anything I can ever do for you the way you've looked after me, all you've got to do is ask. And Tommy Finney said, what are you doing on Monday? He said, why? He said, I've got to put a bath in because he was a plumber and my labourer's off sick. What are you doing, Will? Can you come and help me? I mean, that's incredible. There's a man I've just described as potentially as great an English footballer as we've had. And he had his own plumbing business, and his labourer was off on the Monday. What did Will help him put the bath in?
How times have changed, eh, Roy?
Oh, unbelievable.
It's still difficult to get a plumber.
Yeah. Unless you're an England international, Pete, I think that's the only thing.
Roy,
the last game, by the way, is also a memorable game on that.
Right.
What looks like a defining 6-3 mauling at Bolton, a mere 6 months after the cup final as well. But that was played on that infamous Saturday when it was so foggy, nobody could see what was going on. I mean, really, the game was off. Now, whether this is true or not, but the story went down the line that Harry Gregg actually had to come back on pitch. Sorry, Billy Foulkes had to come back on the pitch at half time, tell Harry Gregg the whistle had gone for half time. I mean, he was, it was incredible. But little Warren Bradley made his debut in that game, and there's a story about that, Peter, as well, isn't there?
There is, yeah. And if I can, yes, because that did start. That started something else. But before we come to the good, did you get to many of those games, Roy? And what were you thinking that after a decent start did any trepidation sneak in?
Yeah, no. I know it sounds silly, but it's hard to put this over into words. In those days, Pete and Tim, is way, 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 way before social media.
Yeah.
United happened to be my team. They played a game on a Saturday, occasionally in midweek, and you went to watch them when you could. And they were your team. And if they won, brilliant. If they got beat, they were still your team. You went again the week after. Or you went to watch the reserves when the first team was away. And you didn't have this. I mean, when you look at social media today, and for an old bugger like me to be on Twitter so much, and you look at it, and I fell for it last night. Somebody had put, slagging Rashford off after about half an hour, and I just put, well, he's not the only one, and one bang, he goes and scores, doesn't he? I mean. You can make yourself look really daft on Twitter if you're not careful. So you didn't have the trepidation. I don't think we expected to win the league that season. We bloody well nearly did, but we didn't expect to win it. And hey, we just got on with it.
No fear at this stage, you'd say, of relegation, because we were plummeting. I think Tim mentioned earlier how we were scoring about 3 a game, and this. In that 10-game run, it moved to about just over 1 a game. So the scoring had dried up. But
13 goals scored and 25 conceded during this run, Pete.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, you weren't hitting the panic button for now, Roy.
No. In fact, it was only the following year, it was either the following year or the year after that I can even remember ever coming. Don't laugh at this, but ever coming across the word relegation. We were having a couple of we had 2 or 3 poor seasons after this 58-9. And at one stage we were 3rd from the bottom around Christmas. And that was the game I told you about, Pete, when I went to Everton. and we were 5-9 down at half time. It was absolutely chucking it down. I tell you what, social media wasn't around in them days. I tell you.
No.
Roy,
We weren't panicking, but then over the next 3 months, as you get into the real winter of 58, 59, something remarkable happens. And between mid-November and mid-Feb, United go on a run of 12 league matches where they win 11 and draw 1. That run included 8 consecutive wins on the bounce and culminated on the 21st of Feb with a victory over Wolves, who were the champions and our closest rivals. So a real turnaround, and it seems that with hindsight, Roy, it's taken a bit for Quicksall to settle in, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Warren Bradley came in, a young lad who you'll be able to provide us with the background, and that sets up for the rest of the season, it seemed, bar injuries, a forward line of Warren Bradley, Albert Quicksall, Dennis Violet, Bobby Charlton, Albert Scanlon. And United, well, it went on the up and up from there. So by the time it got to 21st of Feb, we beat Wolves and went level with them on goal average, it would have been then. But did you see that one coming, that run?
No, not really, except the signing of Warren Bradley gave that beautiful word balance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Warren Bradley was a number 7.
Mm-hmm.
And again, for younger people, we call them right wingers. He was a right winger. He stayed on the wing. He beat his fullback. He got crosses over and he scored goals when he could. Albert Scanlon was a left winger. Mm-hmm. He stayed on the left, beat a man, sent great crosses over and scored a goal when he could. Dennis was playing the centre forward role. Bobby Charlton was, in my opinion, in his best position, which is inside forward.
Mm-hmm.
And Albert Quicksall was also an inside forward. So the word clicked, a bit like when Fernandes walked in the team after getting beat 2-0 with Burnley. Yeah. And you're scratching your head and you're banging your head on the wall and you're wondering what's going to go on. And bingo, someone comes in the team and it clicked, didn't it? And that's what actually happened. It wasn't just Quicksall was part of it, but Warren Bradley, who United didn't sign. Warren Bradley came with 2 other guys to help United out at Munich from the amateur club Bishop Auckland, who were the only club who offered players for free to Manchester United. And Bishop Auckland were a very famous amateur side. And they offered the famous captain Bob Hardesty, a great inside forward called Derek Lewin, and this young winger called Warren Bradley, who actually was a school teacher in the Manchester area. Mm-hmm. And Bradley turned professional the week before the Bolton game, and that was his debut. And it just clicked, and it clicked because they had total balance. They had 2 wingers, a goal-scoring centre forward, and 2 brilliant inside forwards. And what is that? You want?
Did that sort of, was that when you talked about the balance there, Roy, and you look at the previous spell that we looked at, the previous 10 games prior to this, where we conceded 25 and scored 13. Yeah. Obviously, the defense was a bit of a makeshift defense. Bill Folks, obviously at right back, and really wasn't himself, as Wolf McGuinness has touched on after Munich, and rightly so. Was there more balance with, like, during that previous stretch where we were conceding quite a bit? Did it seem like there was more balance in the back as well? And the other thing I noted down from that 8 games that we're talking about is it really 14 goals between Charlton and Dennis Violet in that 8-game stretch were the 2 things that really stood out for me.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Bill obviously was such a strong man, and I think obviously the reaction would be hitting in on that. But I think it's staying with the word balance, Tim. I think when your forward line is pushing the opposition back, playing quite brilliantly, I think that takes the pressure off a defence, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So if you're pushing the opposition back, you've two wingers who are flying, you've got a goal scorer who knocks them in for fun like Dennis did in his whole career. But you've got Charlton who's scoring goals for fun. I mean, just look at those games there in that great run. Charlton.
I tell you what's incredible, like you're right, Bobby Charlton's on fire, but this can't have happened very often. Look at Leicester at home and Preston away, 4-1 and 4-3. We score 4 2 weeks on the run, and the same goal scorers. Now you get that sometimes if you win 1-0, 2-0, maybe 3-0, but and 3 of them scored in the 4-0 against Birmingham 2 weeks before that. So.
And on top of that, look at like Roy touched on with Bradley coming into the side, and I think that started the run of 12 goals and 25 appearances for him. So as Roy touched on, that threat from the flank, which was just immense.
Here's one for you, gents. Here's one for you, and anyone who's kindly listening to us around the world or even in sunny Worsley, who played his only match for Manchester United in the away game at Aston Villa, that's shown there, when they won 2-0 at Christmas in 1958. He played one game in his whole career for Manchester United, and that was it.
That's a belter, Roy. I stumbled across this. I wouldn't have known this. But I saw the name. I was looking for how many games Bradley played after he came in against Bolton. In 25 of the next 27 games, and I had to count them up. There was nothing that I just had to do it manually. Blah blah blah. Anyway, the Aston Villa game, to answer your question and to clear that debt I owe you of 4 Peronis, I think it was a guy called Reg Hunter.
Correct. Reg Hunter, left winger from Wrexham. Right, Colin Bay. Yeah. Well done, Pete. Man,
now, Roy.
That's 20 odd quid you've just won then, because Peronis are £5 odd around here, aren't they?
Right. If only we weren't in lockdown. But so it seemed like that really fitted in. Yeah, Bradley came in. I believe also Joe Carolan came in that game or the one after, and he played in something like 25 out the next 27, and didn't. I think now Dennis Violet switched to centre forward that game, and I've read somewhere that those 3 changes. You know, when you've got a bit like United now under Solskjaer, you've got probably a very good Formula 1 car with all the right parts under the bonnet, but sometimes it really does misfire, and sometimes the windows don't work and the windscreen wipers don't work. But get the parts all working and it purrs. And I reckon the Bradley coming in, Joe Carolan seems to stay for the rest of the season, and Violet going to an out-and-out centre forward. Replacing Tommy Taylor, I guess. Roy, but you saw it. What's your view?
Well, yeah, I mean, Dennis was a cultured man on and off the field. A real interesting story, Dennis. But he was a brilliant inside left, and he adapted just to playing the number 9 game very easily. And of course, Charlton playing it inside forward, quick saw. You know, I mean. In the end, 4 of those were England internationals. Scanlon, I don't think ever played for England, but he had a great season, did Albert Scanlon. But it's just that word luck and the word balance. And I'll throw something out there to all the modern supporters of United who hopefully are listening as well tonight. In my opinion, if we make one signing, but I don't know whether it's fullback, centre back, midfield, right winger, as in right winger, or an absolute genuine goal scorer. If we make one right signing, a la Bruno, by the end of January, we've got a shout. We really have got a shout in the league and the Europa League.
Yeah.
No, it's got to be that. It's got to be that right. It's got to be that right signing that just gels and clicks the light on all over the pitch, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah, exactly. So that great run we see, 11 wins out of 12, and so the one draw was Newcastle at home, and we were 4-1 up.
That's a game people talk about from that era.
Yeah. 4-1. I think we were 4-1 at half time, actually.
4-1 at half time, yeah.
Wow.
But the good run continues. I think we have a blip. We lose to Arsenal after that run, but then
Arsenal
we move to
Arsenal were top at table, though, Pete.
Say it again.
I say Arsenal. Just look where Arsenal were. You know, there was no disgrace there. They were right up there themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were hanging
behind us.
Yeah. But we have a blip there, then win the first 5 games that we've got. Sorry, there was 4 at the top there that we win it on the bounce. And then, Roy, we come to Good Friday, the 27th of March, 1959. Manchester United beat Portsmouth 6-1. So 5 wins on the bounce, which makes it something now like 16 games we've won and 1 draw, 1 loss.
Mm-hmm.
That took us to the top of the table.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, that was 13 months after the crash. Isn't that amazing?
Remarkable.
Yeah. And in that, I actually stupidly got it wrong in my own mind earlier today, but the victory over Wolverhampton at Old Trafford in front of a full house, 62,000 as it was then, and we beat Wolves in February 2-1, and that was, you know, that was just 12 months after the crash. And at this time, in February 58, we were in a higher league position than February 59. We were in a higher league position than we'd been in February 58.
Yeah, who'd have thought that?
It's incredible.
Amazing.
Oh no, people genuinely, when they beat Portsmouth 6-1, they really thought, you know, you've got a chance here of winning the title. The thing was, that was Good Friday with Portsmouth at home. Then we had to go to Burnley on Easter Saturday, and then we had to travel to Portsmouth for the return on Easter Monday. And the Burnley game, of course, was the one that really dented it ever so slightly, because Wolves were a decent side, by the way. They were the champions from the previous year, and they were a mature side. Again, all 11 players in the right positions. It's so vital to have that balance and have that, you know, that longevity of teamwork and everything. And of course, Burnley away, Bob Lord in the stand, and bad memories of that sheer, what became hatred more at the Bob Lord side than it did at the Manchester side, really.
Yeah, it's just remarkable when you look at what, you know, to go top of the table that soon after what is just a horrific, you know, tragedy, and you look at what, you know, Dennis Violet, Sir Bobby, and Albert Scanlon were able to put together that season. Sir Bobby 29 goals, Dennis Violet 21 goals, and Albert Scanlon 16 goals. Combined for, you know, 66 goals. After what has just been a traumatic event for them to take place. I mean, it must have been bursting with pride as United supporters to see them respond like that.
And of course, the truly great Harry Gregg.
Of course, Harry and Bill.
And Billy Folks, who, you know, his sheer look, that face, that set in stone face that he always had, you know, there was a man that you wouldn't mess with. You know, so there was 5 players who'd played, 5 players who'd actually played in the game against Arsenal at the 5-4 victory. Gregg, Folks, Scanlon, Violet, and Charlton. And here they were, you know, back to physical form.
Just amazing.
Playing like the, you know, the could. But as I say, the mental scars must have been horrific, really.
The crowd, the noise, the atmosphere must have been fantastic, mustn't it? Because I guess when the world has been so dark in life as a supporter, and to come back like this, it just shows, it fits in brilliantly with Manc Defiance, because we love that. No, that's something we're good at, and to show the world that we still had spirit, and that Harold Hardman was right. United will go on, he said immediately after the crash. To get to 13 months later and, just have the noses in front at the top must have been incredible.
Yeah. I've not got Wolves' fixtures, obviously, at the time, but they must have gone on a hell of a run as well. I know we beat them, but...
yeah. If you when we won that game against Portsmouth, we played that day. Wolves didn't, so we did go top by a point. And for folk, we should have perhaps explained to folk with his league tables. It was 42 league games in a season, and you got 2 points for a win then, and 1 for a draw. So so we just need to bear that in mind. But we went top, but Wolves did have 2 games in hand. And I guess if you want to put the next slide up, Tim, Roy's alluded to it, that we went to Burnley on Easter Saturday, took a bit of a whooping. That day, I think Wolves won. I'm just trying to see if I've got where Wolves won at. But do you think that cost us a bit, that Burnley defeat?
Yeah, well, of course, at that stage, any defeat, and even I noticed there we drew 0-0 at Luton Town, and dropping a point would be vital because, as you say, Wolves had a couple of games in hand then, and that's 4 points, and you had to match. You literally had to match Wolves, didn't you? Point for point. So if you drew. In a way, you can forget the Leicester City game, which was the last game of the season, because they couldn't have won the title on that day. So I think that explains 1 or 2 things in that particular match. There's a sad point about the Birmingham City match, actually, which we won 1-0. I'm 99% certain. I've got the programme somewhere. I'm 99% certain that a marvellous fullback called Jeff Hall, who was the England fullback with Roger Byrne, by the way, in his time. I think he played in that game for Birmingham, and he tragically died of polio 12 months later. And you just can't believe that, can you? Or had he died? Did he die during that season? I'm not sure. But Jeff Hall was a marvellous footballer. I'm just seeing it.
Right.
Yeah. He actually died from polio just before that game, which is tragic.
Right. Of course. On that Easter Saturday, we were lost at Burnley. Sorry, no disrespect to Jeff Hall and the tragedy that befell Birmingham, but we lost to Burnley 4-2. Wolves won at Preston, which left us Wolves on 49, United on 48 points. I'll have to talk this one through, Roy. Wolves were still 2 games in hand. Easter Monday and Easter Tuesday, we won at Portsmouth and Wolves won, so it was still 1 point difference. Wolves still 2 games in hand. 4th of April, United beat Bolton and Wolves only drew with Burnley. So they both ended up on 52, but Wolves still 2 games in hand and getting close now to the 42. 11th of April, United drew at Luton and Wolves draw with Bolton. So again, it stays on 53. It's tantalising. 13th of April, though, Wolves play one of the games in hand and win at Blackpool. So they're now a game in hand and 2 points ahead. The Saturday the 18th, United beat Birmingham in that game you mentioned, Roy. Wolves beat Luton 5-0. It leaves it with United 1 game remaining, 2 points behind Wolves, but Wolves have got 2 games to play. And Wolves beat Leicester 5-0 on the 22nd of April to become English League champions for the 2nd year running. United have to relinquish that great run. But I think in the end, United of the last 6 matches, we won 3, drew 1, lost 2, got 7 points. Wolves in their last 8 matches in that same period, because they had 2 games in hand. In that last 8 matches, they won 6 and drew 2 and got 14 points. So fair dues to them. They ended it with a sprint, but what a valiant attempt by United, blimey.
The title, Pete and Tim, the title, when you think about it,
Mhm.
was really settled in that mid-September to mid-November period.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's that poor stretch. Yeah.
We'll say you can forget the Leicester game in a way because that's the last game of the season. And if you'd have picked, if's a big word, by the way, the 2 letters, but if they'd have picked 4 points up, extra points in that, or 5 points in that big spell, which is, I'm still, even today, even if you lose in a game that you expected to win, I'm always thinking, try and get that draw. If you can just get that draw in mid-November, that might mean a heck of a lot in April. And, it's just, look at that. Well, Newcastle, 4-1 and drawing 4-4. It's incredible. 1 point, Pete, there. Look at, just mention there the goals that both Wolves and United scored in the 42 games.
Oh, yeah. Over 100 goals, Roy.
100, 103 goals for United, or 106, I think.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Roy, do you want to win one of those Peronis back? Manchester United have only ever scored over 100 goals 3 times in their 142-year history. That's in a league season, forgetting games. 100. They've done it in 2 other seasons. Do you want to have a go? You'd have to get both to get a full Peroni.
I think it's going to be a half. I've got a feeling. Did they get 100 goals before the First World War in one of the seasons?
Oh, I think I'm going to be quids in at the end tonight, Roy. Not according to my records. No, it's a bit quirky. Not. Well, I thought it was quirky, but. I'll get you a Peroni anyway, because but only 3 times in 142-year history. And you think of the teams that Manchester United have had, Tim, the great 99 team, the 68 team, Betts, Lauren Sharp, and all that.
Yeah.
They did it. They've done it 3 times in the history.
Go on.
56, 57, 103.
Ooh.
Yeah.
58, 59, which we're talking about, 103.
Yeah.
And 59, 60, 102.
Wow.
So in all those seasons,
that's amazing.
They came in the space of 4 seasons.
Wow.
So it must have been a great attacking side we had, or the English football had. I guess it got more defensive in the 60s, but I thought that was amazing. I couldn't believe it.
I can't believe that it came at post. You look at obviously the Babes. It's not a surprise, but that season, and then you said the 59, so the 2 seasons after that as well.
And what other record happened in one of those?
Wow.
What other record also happened in one of those 3 seasons?
Oh, that's a very wide-ranging question.
In terms of Manchester United, a personal record that has become a club record, and it still stands.
Right. No Peroni on this, Roy. Dennis Violet broke the club goal-scoring record for league goals in a season. He beat Jack Rowley's record of 30 by getting 32.
Yes, and I think that was the 59-60 season.
Yes, and it's never been beaten by Ronaldo, by Bestie, by Law, by Ruud van Nistelrooy, etc.
And he missed at least 5 of the last 7 games for injury.
Amazing.
Wow.
Roy, just to sort of sum up the 58-59 season, and obviously United didn't win the league, but when you look back on that, season is through all the seasons that you've seen, where does that rank in the context of great seasons for you? It's taking in, looking at what had transpired the season before and some of the individual performances that we talked about to a man in that 58-59 season, where does it rank for you in terms of United's history?
It's one of those great seasons that sadly historians, mere mortals, fans, etc., just don't realise happened. But when you do put all the connotations together of what had actually happened, that in August of that year, they were starting a season without effectively 10 really top world class, in some cases, players, 10 players and yet they finished second to a very, very good Wolverhampton side who were already champions from the previous season. And in that season, to finish second, we would have a period, was it 10 or 11 games, where we did we win, not win, or, in mid-September to mid-November. We'd gone all those 10 games and we finished up. If you forget the last game, I know you shouldn't, but if you forget the last game, we were 4 points behind on the last day of the season. Yeah. And we picked 5 points up in those 10 or 11 games. I'd have fancied us to have won at Leicester.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It is. And it's one reason, Tim, why we thought we'd cover it. We got a couple of people who suggested it after our first podcast a month ago. I'm grateful for those people, know who they are. It doesn't get the coverage perhaps it deserves because we didn't win anything. But we're always known for, I love the expression, daring do. Daring do. I think Errol Flynn had daring do. But that panache, that adventure of United, that is the essence of Manchester United, doesn't always come with a trophy at the end of it. And 58-59 had all that tremendous battling against adversity and almost coming up with the title.
Always remember, if you're a Manchester United supporter, any bad day will be outweighed by 3, 4, 5 good ones. And it always comes back with a magnificent club. We've got genuine fans who love the club. They're our team. And we'll have better days and we'll have worse days.
Such a tremendous way to close out this episode, Pete. I love those words.
You can't beat that. You can't top that, Roy.
No. Roy, thank you so much for joining us. This was just a tremendous trip down memory lane. Like you just said, a season that doesn't get the glamour that it should, because it really was such a tremendous feat after what happened the season before. Thank you for all those who tuned in and watched and for your interaction. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And hopefully we can have Roy back again in the future and dig into another season of yesteryear or talk about players or whatever it is, Roy, or just a wealth of knowledge. So bring back more trivia.
Be my pleasure. Lovely to meet you, Tim, and also Pete, of course, top man. And don't get your bed sheets out tonight about Ollie. You stay where you are with them bed sheets.
Lesson learned, Roy.
Thanks for tuning in, people. Goodbye.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Roy. Thanks, everyone.
See you, Tim. Bye.
See ya.